What I'd like to talk about today is selling through questioning. Selling through questioning starts with effective listening. Okay. With effective listening, you will always know what questions need to be asked so you can get your prospect properly engaged. When you're doing inside sales, it's done over the telephone, so you don't have the advantage of face-to-face contact with your prospect. You can't read his body language. The only thing you have is what he or she says and how they say it. Generally, one would think that for a salesperson to make a living, that they have to do most of the talking. I'm here to tell you guys that is absolutely a myth. You do not need to talk a lot to make a living. You need to make a lot of calls and you need to listen a lot. He who actually listens more than he talks will make more sales, hence make more money. The typical salesperson spends about 70% of his waking hours in communication with others. The communication breaks down to communication with others, 9% in writing, 16% in reading, 30% in talking, and 45% in listening. So what that means is you should be listening half the time. If you find yourself talking too much, sometimes you may talk yourself out of a sale. This is also known as overselling. I want to talk a little bit about your career and your success. As a salesperson, we're always taught objections, how to talk, how to pitch. One of the things that a lot of us miss out on is listening and the true importance of recognizing actual problems and doing something about them. On objections, to overcome an objection, you have to listen. So we can boil down problems of listening that salespeople have into three categories. The first being paying attention. If you don't pay attention, you won't be a good listener. Being a good listener takes work. Most people, it's general nature to avoid work if you can. Try and get as much done with as little work as possible. So that always presents questions that need answering and problems that need solving. You know, you feel like you could use the time to a better advantage, like preparing what you're going to say when the person talking gets through. Always pay attention to your speaker. Always. If you've ever been guilty of faking attention to the speaker while your mind wandered all over the place, and this happens, I do it too, you know, when a prospect is boring or uninteresting, you know, I'm going to resist the brain work, but the fact is distractions take their toll on all who are listening. Some of these can't be avoided, but some can be tuned out with a little effort. For example, If you're placed on hold waiting for the decision maker to come to the phone, don't let your mind wander. Don't dwell on petty annoyances or personal problems. Instead, make good use of this dead time. Think about what you are going to say to the prospect. Think about your attention getting and your interest creating statements. Okay, think about how you're going to paint that picture. If you don't, you're going to be unprepared when your prospect comes to the phone. And when this happens, you're not prepared to make a good attention-getting, interest-creating statement that is going to paint a real picture for this potential client, and you won't earn the right to qualify that prospect. And of course, what's of greater concern is, you won't get any accounts placed that way. The second thing we run into that's an obstacle when attempting to fully listen. Sometimes we miss the real point. I'm guilty of this. I get more interested in a prospect's account and his tone of voice and how he says something than what he's really saying. And yes, I should definitely pay attention to the prospect's account, his tone of voice, how he says something, but also paying attention to what that prospect is saying is really important. Sometimes I find myself paying so much attention to getting bits of little facts that I miss the real meaning. And I'm not talking about facts that really matter. I'm talking about facts that are out of context, facts that can cause a misunderstanding or result in a wrong conclusion. So always pay attention to the point. Don't let your prejudices, your biases, or previous experience hinder your selling to a prospect. Keep an open mind so you can listen for buying signals. And when doing this, you will experience effective communication. Always pay attention to being genuine, having empathy for the prospect's issues that he or she may be dealing with, and always give your prospects due respect. That's also something that's important, which brings me to my third issue that causes us not to listen properly. At times, we let our emotions interfere. And let me go back to paying attention, because right now, I'm talking to you guys, and I'm finding myself not paying attention because I'm cutting my air conditioner off here with the remote, and I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. This is how easy it is for us to lose the attention of a prospect. Our mind, it automatically can veer off in the places where it should not be when we're attempting to make a presentation. I just did it with this remote control, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. And I caught myself. I said, wait a minute, I'm giving a presentation on listening and paying attention, and I'm not paying attention. Guys, look how important this is. Back to my next point. The third point is when we're on the phone. Okay, sometimes this can be very testing. We're providing a presentation and the prospect does not want to listen to it. Sometimes we get beat up, we feel beat up, and we let our emotions interfere. This is something that we have to absolutely be cognizant of, because your emotions are always a barrier to communications and to comprehensions. If you've ever noticed, if you've been in an argument with someone, a brother, a sister, a parent, a spouse, a child, when our emotions get involved, we lose the ability to comprehend, and we lose the ability to communicate effectively. This can make you hostile to your prospect's point of view, and it can make you unduly enthusiastic about it. Emotions are difficult to control, but when you really get a handle on them and you can anticipate what they will do, you can recognize your reactions and say to yourself, wait a minute, maybe I better calm down, look at the facts for what they are, and not get overly anxious, be calm, cool, collective, which brings me to another point. Being anxious or anxiety to sell your product can cause you to tell your prospect everything you know about your service. Man, it has this, it has that. Look, let me tell you about every bell and whistle. Man, look, our yield here is 3 times the industry average. We have fully transparent online access. Our collectors are gods, man. These guys are rock stars. We also, we remit when the payment clears. You see, all of this stuff is too much information in the beginning. We just want the opportunity to qualify. Yes, we want to sell on these points, but to properly present these things, we want to use that ammunition when it's suited, when it's warranted. So if we don't feel that we must tell a prospect everything we know about our collection service, we focus more on finding out what they need. Okay, that's something that can bring you into a feature and a benefit. If your prospect's telling you, oh well, I use this other agency, they do a pretty good job. They collect a good bit of my money, man, but oh man, they take a long time to send me my remit check when they get paid, man, and it's getting kind of old. Well, that's when you feature, hey, well, our agency has a remit upon clearance policy. When we get a check in-house from a debtor, as soon as that check clears our trust account, we remit payment to our client. Now, let's get to the benefits. The benefits of that is, it's clear. Your prospect gets his or her money faster. And that's always a benefit. Who wants to get their money slower, right? Now that we've discussed why human nature sometimes is not to listen, let's talk about some basic principles for more effective listening. And the key to success here is putting them into practice through conscientious determination to listen effectively. So, guys, we have to keep an open mind about this, continually learn, evolve, discover possibilities, have vision, and develop our potential to focus on the solutions that are there for us to write business. First point here is limit your own talking. And right now, I'm the only one doing any talking because I've got viewers. I don't have anybody who's actually joined into the forum. I don't know why that is, and if the forum continues that way, that'll that'll work. I can do all of the talking. I know a little bit about the collection industry, and we can put questions together after I end the presentation. But let's talk about thinking like a prospect. Okay? If you listen to your prospect from his or her point of view and try to think what the prospect is thinking, it may help you anticipate questions even before they're asked. So when we take the time to listen, the prospect will always tell us what we need to do to make that sale. So anytime that you get the feeling that you're not selling when you're not talking, get out of that habit. Absolutely get out of that habit, because that'll bring you right into the habit of talking too much and forcing the prospect to listen. And that's not going to get you anywhere. You may pick up some accounts, but you won't pick up a lot of accounts. And to really be successful in sales, in whatever you're doing, you have to write a lot of business, write a lot of deals, make a lot of sales. So again, much can be learned by getting the prospect to talk. There's some good, there are very good inside salespeople that make it a rule to avoid talking more than a minute at a time unless they are giving the prospect a chance to say something. If the prospect cuts in, stop. If you're talking too much, the prospect probably won't hear another word you say anyway. And nothing on the call is going to be as interesting as what that prospect is waiting to say. If the prospect asks a question, you don't have to be too quick with the answer. Sometimes you want to wait a few seconds to show that you're considering the question. If you consider the question, you just might give a better answer. So sometimes, and try this, sometimes force yourself to wait a couple of seconds to ponder that question. And also, if you wait just a second, you can also be sure that the prospect has finished talking. That way you're not cutting your prospect off. Because nobody likes to talk to someone that cuts them off. So, point of that, don't sound as if you can't wait to start talking. So, point here, the prospect wants attention. The prospect wants to be listened to. So give him your full attention. Acknowledge what he says by giving some reply and use interjections. Your prospect cannot read body language, nods of your head, or eye contact over the telephone to know that you're listening. So use an occasional yes. Oh, I see. Okay. Uh-huh. Absolutely. To let your prospect know that you're listening. And that will encourage your prospect to tell you more. Okay, with this, we're encouraging. When we give a yes or a, oh, I see your point, Mr. Prospect, or, okay, you have a point there, or absolutely, Mr. Prospect, you're encouraging your prospect to tell you more. And this is something that's going to lead you into listening for ideas. So now we're encouraging the prospect. We've learned how to block out the other stuff and listen, and we're learning how to encourage our prospect. Now we want to listen for ideas. Okay, good listeners focus on the central ideas of the prospect. They can discriminate between fact and opinion. They listen for the big picture, where, on the other hand, poor listeners are apt to pay attention to facts, even minor ones, and not catch the important differences between actual facts and the prospect's actual opinion. Okay? The prospect's opinion is what's important. So when you're listening for ideas, again, think from the prospect's point of view, and you can only do that by listening for the prospect's opinion. Okay? So when we're listening, we're selling. Okay? And don't get me wrong, listening is hard work. You know, sometimes you're listening and your heart starts beating because you want to jump in, you want to interject, you want to say something. Your circulation's stimulated, your body temperature rises, and you know you want to go in for the kill. But relax, listen. Okay, determine what you need to do personally to work at listening. You know, check your posture. You know, does your posture show interest and attention, or does it show, oh man, yeah, I wanted to tell you about our service, and yeah, man, I'm just kicking back here trying to sell something. You know what? That's garbage. You do that, you won't sell. Promise you. Let's see what else I have here. Changes in tone and volume. These will give away hidden meanings. I'm not saying pay too much attention to this stuff, but be conscious of it. And it will help you determine what the prospect is really trying to say, because sometimes you're listening for ideas, not words, and when you're getting opinions and viewpoints behind the specific words that are being said, it can help you determine the way to actually go in. So, and that'll also help keep you from overreacting to individual words or expressions. It's part of getting the big picture. Oh, we lost a viewer. Awesome. Oh, we got one back. All right. Anyway, this should also lead you into taking simple notes. Okay, you want to always put your notes into the CRM system on your prospect, and of course, you know, your appropriate follow-up dates and whatnot. But always take down the most important details. It will improve your ability to remember specific conversations if you need to. It'll also help you go back and review any objections that your prospect may have made, or comments that he or she may have made about any part of your presentation. This can also help you to persuade while you're listening. When you have to listen to a prospect's entire presentation without personal involvement, and we talked about this on our Hangout Tuesday. I mentioned, you know, when you're listening to a speaker on a platform, you have to listen to his entire presentation without personal involvement, because he doesn't need you. But as an inside salesperson, you listen to very short speeches, you know, perhaps a few seconds in length. So part of your listening job is to draw your prospect out to get more information by encouraging your prospect. And back to encouragements, a simple, oh, I see, or okay, absolutely. I see your point there, Mr. Prospect. Those are encouragements. They help your prospect continue, and it also helps you engage your prospect to really get into the meat of your conversation. Now, let's get to the meat of this conversation. Selling through questioning, because questions can help you sell. After you've begun to engage your prospect, questions will help you sell. A good point to remember is your sale is an interview, okay? So get control. Get control by engaging, by listening, and then asking questions. And once you gain control of your sale interview, okay, because you're interviewing your prospect to make a sale, you can then properly present and you earn the right to qualify. Okay? Now, a good point to remember is you lose control of the interview, you've lost any opportunity to get that prospect to place any accounts with you. So, let's look at the questions in your selling toolbox. Now, we all know, let's use a carpenter, for example. When a carpenter handles his tools skillfully, that carpenter can create beautiful things, beautiful furniture, beautiful anything made out of wood. Okay? Now, in your selling toolkit, questions are among your best tools, because if you think about it, questions are what is going to bring out your qualifications. How do you qualify a prospect? By asking questions, right? So when you handle your questions skillfully, just like the carpenter handles his tools skillfully, you will bring the needs and the objections of your prospect out into the open so that the right decision will be obvious. Okay? Now, let's move back a little bit about, let's talk about an inexperienced inside salesperson that talks and talks and talks and talks until the prospect withdraws, becomes unconcerned, and sometimes even antagonistic. Okay, that when you catch yourself, and I still catch myself talking too much sometimes when I'm trying to sell, and whenever I do that, I can't sell. The way I sell is through listening, through questioning, and by properly earning the right to qualify a prospect. So we were saying a second ago, or well, I was saying a second ago, that skillful questioning will draw the prospect out. Okay, we want to use that to lead him or her into making the decision that you are after as an account executive, which in this particular case is the placement of accounts with Lyons and Associates. We want them to place their collection accounts with us so we can collect that account and get a commission off of a percentage of every dollar that we collect for that client. Okay? Now, when that prospect makes that decision himself, he is more convinced of his soundness, and he's he's prepared to defend his decision too, because now he's made that decision. We've brought the prospect into a decision-making process by listening, by engaging, by encouraging, and by asking questions. Now he's made the decision to use Lyons and Associates, and it's his decision. So now, with it being his decision, your work is done as far as getting the placements in. Now, that doesn't mean the selling stops there, because now you have to develop that client to get that client to place continuous business with you. Okay, now back to questions. That's what we're supposed to be talking about anyway. I know you guys are probably sitting there bored saying, man, when's he going to talk about the types of questions? You know, is it going to be open-ended questions, closed-ended? Two types of questions, open-ended and closed-ended. You use closed-ended questions when you want answers that can be answered in 1 or 2 words. For example, closed-end questions can be used to ask questions during the qualifying process. Okay? You want to use open-ended questions when you want to get the prospect to talk and you want to get more information about a particular objection or a particular point of view that the prospect is making. Okay, so there are going to be questions to get the prospect's opinion, there are going to be questions to keep the prospect talking, and questions to get the prospect's reaction, questions to gain agreement, and questions to assure understanding. So ask, ask, ask. You want the what, the why, the when, the how, the where, and the who. Now, when we want to get a prospect's opinion, we have tactics that have been successfully used by inside salespeople over and over for decades, for as long as inside salespeople have been selling over the phone. And this simply asks for the prospect's opinion involving a third party. For example, and Rick Johnson uses this one all the time and gets the proper response. A number of credit managers tell me that if an account goes over 150 days, they consider it dead. How do you feel about this? Or, you know, most of the credit managers I talk to tell me that once an account's over 150 days, you might as well write it off as a loss. How do you feel about this? When the prospect agrees that the account is a loss at 150 days, you can lead him to a solution. That solution is placing the account with Lyons and Associates for collection before the account reaches 150 days. Okay, work your account in-house till it reaches 120 days. You say it's dead at 150, that gives us a month to work it before it's dead. That's an absolute solution to the dilemma that that prospect is faced with when his accounts become dead at 150 days. Other questions to lead a prospect to opinion. You know, you may say, you know, I read that small business bankruptcies are increasing. Does that concern you? Better yet, one of my clients told me that finding good collectors is very difficult. Do you find that true? And you're asking a leading question. You know they find it true. You already know this because, well, look at the competition. Need I say more? Also, you want to remember when you're referring to a particular fact or situation that you can hook into the prospect situation. Use similar questions. What's your opinion on this? Or do you consider this a problem? Has this ever happened to you? And you will get an appropriate answer, and you're now engaging. Now, once your prospect has reacted to several questions, your prospect has exposed his needs, and you can use your prospect's responses right back to them as an opener for the solution. One way to go in is to say, based on what you have told me, it would seem that the solution would be to place your accounts at Lyons and Associates at 120 days. Or based on what you've told me about, let's say you're talking to a transportation carrier. Based on what you have told me about a large number of brokers stiffing your company lately, it seems that the solution would be to place your accounts for collection sooner and to find a collector that is better at what they do, that's more knowledgeable about the trucking industry. So what you're doing here is you're getting the who, the how, you're getting the where, you're getting the why, the what, and the when. What you're doing is you're asking the question and you're finding the answer. Okay? Now, once you've begun getting that prospect talking, there are also your open-end questions that are designed to keep your prospect talking. Okay? Now, your immediate objective here is to keep your prospect talking about his need and what he hopes to gain. That way he can make a decision to accept our services as the best solution to his collection needs and his delinquency reduction needs. And once he sees that as a solution, it becomes his or her own idea. Okay, and you can do this with questions and with a short reaction to the prospect's answers. We do this by using reinforcement words, like I was talking about before, the okay, absolutely, I see, Mr. Prospect, I agree with you. We tend to keep doing something when we're rewarded for it, right? And we tend to stop doing something when we are ignored or when we're punished. So the smart inside salesperson rewards their prospect for his answers and keeps him talking by praising him for the action he took, by showing approval for the right answers and ignoring the wrong ones. Okay, guys and gals, this is how you really, truly get control of the conversation. You use psychology. Okay, psychology is so important in selling. Okay, also, you can repeat your prospect statements for key words. Okay, and the reward doesn't need to be great. In fact, a single word like good or an approving sound like and will be enough. So remember some points about your reinforcement words. You want to be specific. Reinforce immediately. Always be sincere. You never never, ever, ever want to be sincere. I mean, excuse me, insincere. You want to reinforce often, but you want to do it unpredictably. You don't want to seem like, you know, this is part of your pitch, because although it is part of your selling, you want it to be realistic. You want it to be natural. And realistic and natural means unpredictable. So be specific, reinforce immediately, be sincere, and reinforce often, but unpredictably. Okay? Now, there are also open-end questions that you can use to check a prospect's reaction during your presentation and even during the answering of objections. Okay? Now, you're going to need to know if your presentation is getting through. Okay? Because if you don't know that your presentation is getting through, you just as well hang up the phone right then and there. Just click. I'm not saying do that, but I'm making a point. You're going to do that by getting your prospect involved in the presentation. When you have the prospect answering questions, you're controlling the sales interview, right? Remember, I mentioned the sales interview. Is his attention or interest lagging? Okay? Are any of you lagging while listening to me? Think about it, because you're going to need to use this when you're interviewing your prospect for the sale. Okay? Is his attention or interest lagging? Is he accepting what you're saying? Is he still with you? If not, when did he leave? The answers to these questions are necessary clues for steering the presentation to where you want it to be and to getting accounts for placement. Now, obviously, you can't just ask these questions in a row, and you certainly can't ask them as I'm stating them here. Hey, Mr. Prospect, is your retention lacking? Well, I guess you better get it together then, huh, Mr. Prospect? Yeah, that doesn't work. Okay, so to find out if his attention is there, your questions must be skillfully worded and presented at the proper time to keep your prospect in step with the presentation. Okay, so here are some open-ended questions to check the prospect's reaction. What is your experience with? And there's, of course, a blank after that. Okay, what is your feeling about, or how do you feel about? What is your major concern? What do you think of? What is the experience you've had with? Are you satisfied with? Could you tell me generally how? Or what kind of? And the things you want to put into these questions are, for example, what kind of efforts is your in-house department using to affect collection and lower your DSO, days sales outstanding? Okay? This can bring you to another question. What are you doing about? What are you doing about could be about anything. What are you doing about customers that do not return your collection calls? Or what are you doing about customers that have a sudden dispute over terms after the account has become past due? You know, how do you feel about some of your customers ignoring you? Are you satisfied with your current agency? Do you think what they're doing could use improvement? Do you think competition ensues improvement? Those are some very good questions. So, you know, we want to look into several different lines of questioning to engage that prospect, and all of these that I just mentioned are going to make your prospect think, and they are going to tell you, is my prospect paying attention, or is my prospect not paying attention? So some other ones are, what problems have you had with, and that can be anything, what problems have you had with bankruptcies? What problems have you had with companies go out of business? Why do you think they aren't paying you? How effective has, okay, and that can be how effective has collections through just telephones and letters been for you? How do you manage to, and that can be, how do you manage to keep your DSO at an acceptable rate? How do you manage to minimize your write-offs? And any of that can be used in just about any context whatsoever. You know, when you're asking, what is your, or what is your major concern, or what is your major concern when? What is your major concern when choosing a new agency? That's a very valid question. It's going to tell you what you need to do to close, because I guarantee you, whatever their major concern is when choosing a new agency, we have an answer for it, and we have a solution to their problem. Tell me, generally, how often do you expect status reports? This is something that most clients have to wait for an agency to send out. They actually have to wait to get their status reports. Now, some of them can log in and get it, but for the most part, status reports come out once a month. And what happens when Bob calls Bill in the credit department and, hey, Bill, yeah, I need to see what the collection agency's doing there. So can you bring me in a up-to-date status report? Well, now Bill says, oh man, I got to call the sales guy at the agency to get a status report to see if he can send me one right now, see if I can get it done right now. Now, the sales guy's on the phone at the other agency trying to make more sales. If he's successful, of course. I mean, if he's not successful, he's probably playing around on the internet, or, you know, off eating some fried chicken at Popeyes or something, whatever he's doing. The point is, most cases are not going to allow that client to get in immediate contact with that sales rep to get an immediate status report. And when that client leaves a voicemail for that sales rep and says, hey, I need a status report, man. Bob, the CFO, is asking me for a status report that's current right now. I'm getting ready to go into a board meeting with them, and man, I've got 45 minutes to get this to them, man. I'm in a pinch here, man. Help me out. Sales rep's going to say, oh, man, this guy didn't say anything about placing business with me, man. I'm not calling him back right now. With our service, the client never has to be faced with that dilemma. They can log in and get their status report. They can also log in and read the collector notes, the investigative notes. They can view any attachments, and guess what our status report shows that the rest of them don't? It shows actual yield. You know why our reports show yield? Because we're proud of how successful we are. We're very proud of it. We want to show our clients, look how awesome we are doing for you. So when your client or your prospective client tells you generally how often they expect a status report, you can absolutely let them know. Well, the good news is you can get it any time. And if you need to know what's going on with a specific account, all you have to do is pull up your claims in the online portal. You can look at the notes. You can see what's going on. Okay. Then you can ask the prospect another question, another engaging question. How do you feel about getting your status reports anytime you need them? And I can't see that response being anything but positive. You can also ask a prospect, what do you think of an agency that produces 3 times the industry average on yield? And guys, just so you know, the industry average now is below 15%. We produce above 45. Okay, so that's typically a no-brainer of how they're going to feel about that. But the point is, we can produce a lot more money for them. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, working your pitch into questions that engage your prospect will always get a better response than the typical canned talk off. So think about your prospect's objection when you ask questions. Then you can determine what question you will ask. Use positive reinforcement when he answers. Do it often, but do it unpredictably. Remember the, oh, I agree. Absolutely. I see. These are positive reinforcements. They encourage your prospect to continue engaging, and they also help you take control of that conversation. Now, one thing you always want to do while we're still talking about open-ended questions is your open-ended questions that you will use to assure your prospect's understanding. Because let's face it, communication is difficult at times. So when you must know exactly what the prospect wants or what the prospect objects to, you should ask questions to force clarification. Now, these might take the form of restating the main points as they are understood, and they may take the form of asking a related direct question. But sometimes these questions are necessary, actually not sometimes, they are necessary to safeguard against any misunderstanding. So right now we're going to we're going to go green. We're going to recycle the prospect's idea. Okay? For example, let me see if I understand. Then you repeat what the prospect said. Then ask, do I have the right idea? Now, you don't want to repeat or imply by the wording of your questions that the prospect has done a poor job of explaining, or that he doesn't have a good command of the English language. You just want to do it as in normal conversation, as if you want to be sure that you understand, because that's exactly what you want. You want to be sure that you understand your prospect's objections and your prospect's wants. Okay, so the last thing you want to tell a prospect is, I don't follow you, or something like, oh, did you mean to say this? You always want to say, well, let me see if I understand correctly. The agency you're currently using has an okay track record with your accounts. They remit usually around 30 days, and they do not have online access. Do I have the right idea here? That way you're confirming, you're repeating it back to the prospect, and you're letting that poor decision on his part for not choosing an agency with higher yields, not choosing an agency with online access, and not choosing an agency that remits when they're supposed to. Instead of you pointing out that being a poor business decision, now it's his or her idea. Oh man, I really screwed up by placing our accounts with this agency. I better find somebody that's good. I better find somebody like Lyons and Associates. So that's also going to help you make your prospect make the right decision. So what I mean by that is you never want to try to make your prospect look stupid. Also, keep in mind, people don't like to be told anything. They do not like to be told what to do, how to do it, or anything like that. But in business, sometimes it's required. Actually, most of the time it's required, but people generally dislike it because people have their own idea of how things should be done. But people also don't mind getting answers to questions. So you can use the prospect's questions to draw out your own questions to get the prospect's wants into the open. So some ways you can restate the prospect's idea or what they're saying is, oh, so in other words, you're saying this, that, and the other. Oh, so what you're really looking for is an agency that remits on time, can give you online access, and collects more of your money. I think everybody's looking for that, right? You can also say, well, it sounds like this to me, or it sounds like that to me, or I take it that this would be the solution. Okay? So another thing you can use as a question, based on what you've told me, do you mind if I make a suggestion? And that way you can avoid the fact that people dislike being told what to do. They welcome suggestions. So when you phrase your remarks accordingly and suggest the right answers based on what you've told me about your agency that collects some of the money, they remit at about 30 days, but you're not too happy about not having online access. Do you mind if I make a suggestion? And you wait for that prospect to answer. And most of the time, they're going to give you a positive answer. No, I don't mind if you make a suggestion. Sometimes you're going to run into one that says, yes, I'm on. Get off of my phone. Send me a brochure. You know, and then the brochure ferry comes out and sends them a brochure. But do you mind if I make a suggestion? It seems to me like you should find an agency that has a more productive yield. You should also find one that remits when the check should be remitted. And you should also find one that has online access. Okay? And these are your suggestions. Or better yet, based on what you've told me about ABC Commercial Collection Agency, I hope that's not really an agency. Do you mind if I make a suggestion? What if you were to allow Lyons and Associates to compete for a portion of the business that you're sending to ABC, and you can determine which service you like better? You know, if you like the one you currently have, or if you prefer somebody that does things with transparency, collects more of your money, and sends you your money when you're supposed to get it. And guys, gals, your prospect can't refuse to listen to a suggestion. So, I mean, realistically, some of them can, but for the most part, your prospect will be more open to it than he would to a direct statement such as, you should really place your accounts with an agency when they're 90 days old, because that's what you have to do. Okay, that's confrontational. What would you rather hear? Based on what you've told me, do you mind if I make a suggestion? Or, you should do this. See? Suggesting rather than telling is also going to be a very good technique when you are trying to educate a prospect or a client. Okay, because educating your prospects or clients is going to be part of your client development stage, and this is something that we'll get further into a little later down the road, or your mentor may be able to get with you about some of this stuff. But developing your prospect, developing your client is so important to strengthen that long-term relationship. It is imperative, and we can use these suggestions to educate our client rather than just telling them what to do. For example, if you're looking to educate a client as to when the appropriate time to place an account with Lyons and Associates is, or when to place their account with a collection agency is, or if you want to suggest a way for them to handle an NSF COD check, or if your objective is to educate your prospect or your client on the collection of the past due accounts, you have to suggest, don't tell. So you want to listen, you want to engage, okay? You engage while you're listening. So you listen, you engage, okay? And when you're engaging, I'm talking about giving some short positive affirmations there. Absolutely. I see. Oh, I agree, Bob. Then you ask your questions. You make suggestions. You qualify. You close. Then you develop for long-term residual revenue from that client, and you continue that relationship to retain them. So listen, engage, ask questions, make suggestions, qualify, close, develop, and most of all, retain your clients. And for the most part, our service is going to sell itself on retention, but you also want that relationship there so you can have control over your relationship with your clients. That is so important. So some other questions to gain agreement are going to be tie-down questions. Questions at the end of your statement which will demand a yes answer that'll force agreement to your proposal. And these are called assumptive closes, okay? Your assumptive closes are imperative to force agreement to your proposal, okay? And I don't mean to sound abrupt here, but this is really what we're trying to do, to get the clients in, to get them to agree to what you're proposing, okay? Because the fact of the matter is they are never going to see how fantastic Lyons and Associates is as a commercial debt collection agency unless we get them in the door. And most of these prospects have dealt with agencies that are less than productive. They don't remit on time. They lie to their clients. Did I mention unproductive? Yeah, I think that was the first thing. Their yields are low. They don't send status reports when they're supposed to. These are all things that many prospects see as the norm for collection agencies. And none of this happens at Lyons and Associates. And the only way you can prove this to a prospect is by getting them on as a client. Okay, sometimes to help them come on, you're going to have to give them references. And if you're a trainee and you don't have any clients yet that you can use for references, ask your mentor for references, okay? Or ask me, email me, and I will give you references that you can use to help you close that prospective client. Now, back to the open-ended tie-down questions at the end of your statement to demand a yes answer to force agreement to your proposal. Okay, don't you agree? And that's it, a simple don't you agree, or doesn't it? Can't you? Don't you? Won't you? Wasn't it? Couldn't it? Or couldn't you? Or how about isn't it? or wouldn't you, or shouldn't it? And you're going to use these in conjunction, sometimes with other words. For example, don't you agree? Another one, is there anything stopping you from placing this account now? Not what is stopping you. Is there anything stopping you from placing these accounts with us now? And that's a big open-ended question. Because if there's not anything stopping them, get the business. Write the account. Let's collect it for them. Make them happy. And then get a referral from them for another client. So some of the ways you want to use the wouldn't it, or the wouldn't you, or the couldn't it, or the won't you, or the wasn't it, or the don't you, or the shouldn't it, or the can't you, or the don't you agree, or the doesn't it, or the isn't it. You would want to get these accounts collected right away. Wouldn't you? Face-to-face contact with your debtor is the best way of collecting a debt. Don't you agree? It certainly would make your department look better if you reduce the number of delinquent accounts, wouldn't it? I mean, those are yes questions that demand yes answers. Assumptive closes. Assumptive closes are important in any sale. Any sale. Okay, so these are going to help you once you've qualified. And sometimes when you're asking your questions and you're making your suggestions, you throw in those assumptive closes. So now you've listened, you've engaged, you've asked some questions, made some suggestions, maybe even an assumptive close or two. Now you qualify. Now it's time to close. And once you close, you develop. And you develop, we retain, and we continue to make a profit, and you continue to make a commission. So you would want to get these accounts collected right away, wouldn't you? Face-to-face contact from one of our licensed and bonded private investigators with your debtor is the best way of collecting a debt. Wouldn't you agree? It certainly would make your department look better if you reduce the number of delinquent accounts, wouldn't it? Okay, so ending your phrases with the wouldn't you, couldn't you, and the don't you, or going to more often than not lead to an affirmative answer. They'll help you take control of the conversation. They will help you close the sale. And basically, what you're trying to do here is get the prospect to agree with you. Get them to agree to the points that you're making during your presentation. And this can only be done when the prospect recognizes that he has a need for our services. Okay, so we have to get those suggestions in, we have to engage, we have to qualify. So what you've actually done here is established a need And not only have you established a need, you have made that need your prospect's own idea, because it's a need that that prospect has already expressed. So from that point, you simply present the benefits of our collection services. Okay? These types of questions, along with the would you be interested questions, or the what's stopping you from placing it, or excuse me, not what's stopping you, is there anything stopping you from placing it now? Because realistically, if you ask them what is stopping you, they're going to come up with the reason of what's stopping them. And if you ask them, is there anything stopping you, it's going to be a yes or no question. Okay, these are some of the best ways to get your prospective client to express agreement for a need of a commercial debt collection service or a collection agency. Okay, this will allow you to make your presentation and get the accounts placed with you. You know, then if there are some objections later on, you can always refer back to that which your prospect agreed to, and this is so important. For example, a statement such as, I don't understand. You did agree that you have accounts that you've been unable to collect, didn't you? Keep your prospect saying yes. I take it that the method used to collect your debtor's account is important to you. Is that right? You know, that brings you back to, you know, the affirmation for face-to-face contact. You know, face-to-face contact with your debtor is the best way of collecting a debt. Don't you agree? Okay. Okay, so again, these are the types of questions that get the prospect to express what is on his or her mind. Then you need to continue to listen and stress the benefit that softens the prospect's concern. Because if you listen, whatever that prospect's concern is, Mr. Prospect is going to tell you. And you can soften that concern through whatever rebuttal overcomes that objection. So remember, we want to listen. We want to engage. Okay? We want to ask questions. We want to make suggestions. We want to qualify. We want to close. And also, we're going to need to make assumptive closes in there. Okay? Once we close, our work is never done. Because if we stop developing once we close, that client may very well become a prospect again. Okay, so it's important after you close, develop and retain, educate, continue to engage, continue to listen, continue to ask questions, continue to make suggestions, continue to qualify, and you will continue to close more deals from that same prospective client. Guys, I am going to close with this. We need to figure out why no one was able to get in and engage this this forum, and you know, we'll figure that out and get it corrected for next time. For everybody that has questions, why don't you email them to me, and I will get with you individually to answer your questions, since we were unable to do it on the forum, and I will use whatever those questions are to come up with a subject for our next on-air Google Hangout, and that way they'll be addressed. Everyone will get the opportunity to see what everyone's questions were, and we can move forward from there. And hey guys, listen, engage, ask questions, make suggestions, qualify, close, develop, and retain. And once you close, when you're developing, don't forget, you still have to listen, engage, ask questions, make suggestions, and you still have to qualify after that prospect becomes a client. Guys, I'm signing off here. I hope you've taken a ton of useful information out of this, and man, let's get out there and make some money.